Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Rich Smith, Executive Advisor, former CMO with 3 decades of experience scaling companies. So we explore with him why customers say yes or don't, what metrics actually drive revenue, and how marketing leaders can translate results into boardroom language. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Thanks so much for having me. I haven't seen a countdown like that since I was about 5, so I love this. Very entertaining.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show, Rich. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe, a lot of companies, a lot of leaders across the globe will actually, want to understand from you how they can make their own companies rich and profitable. So we'll talk about all that. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, your story, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Sure. Well, I'm thrilled to be speaking to your audience today. I'll tell you just a little bit about myself. I've been the chief marketing officer of 7 different companies over the last 25 years. Everything from Fortune 500 financial services firms, national United States, national mortgage company, as well as a smaller privately held data company that had 125 people that I helped get to an exit. So I've been in a lot of different industries over that time period. And, one of the things that always struck me was just how important the whole field of business creation is to our lives, our economy, our continued prosperity and productivity in the world, life-saving devices and pharmaceutical products. And I found, that a lot of companies fail, not because they have a bad product or they have bad people, because they've never figured out how to get distribution and how to get traction in the marketplace so that their growth is sustainable and scalable.
Absolutely. So from my audience perspective, who consists of a lot of small businesses, mid-sized businesses, who are looking at opening businesses, running online businesses, I want to understand, for how should they understand what is it that you are saying with what you are saying, with what you are doing?
Yeah. So one thing that I often run into with small business is they'll ask me questions like, or the CEO asks me questions like, well, should we be doing more on Facebook, or should we be doing more in paid search, or should we invest more in social media or trade shows, or this online platform, or should we be advertising here? And my answer is always something like, well, maybe, right? Tell me what your strategy is, and I'll tell you what tactics fit the strategy. I think that's one of the things that a lot of small businesses and mid-sized businesses get wrong, or fall into a trap of feeling like they need to try all these different channels and need to be in all these different places. And the reality is, you typically don't have the resources to spread yourself that thin. And when you spread yourself that thin, one, it drives up your operational cost, but 2, it reduces the likelihood that you're going to find a distribution process or channel that really works for you. You might get lucky, but chances are pretty good that you're not going deep enough in any one area in order to actually get traction in the market. So one of my, one of the ways that we begin to break that down for people is we think about what is the continuum that a potential buyer of your product or your service goes through. Because every buyer follows some kind of continuum, right? From all the way from the point where they don't even know what you do, they've never heard of you, they don't even know that they have the problem that you're solution, your product or your service solves for them. All the way and down the other end of the extreme is they know they have the problem, they have a burning need to solve it, they've got their credit card or their checkbook in hand, and they're ready to pay for your product and service. So when you're starting out and you're smaller, you want to be more towards that latter end of the continuum, right? Where are the buyers who are ready to buy? Find them first, because that's where your marketing, your sales efforts are going to be the most effective and will be the most efficient as well too. The further you get up the awareness scale to the point where you're trying to make people aware of your product or create demand for your product, you're probably not going to be successful, because that takes massive resources and a very, very long time to get any kind of traction.
Right, right, Rich. So when you talk about predictable growth, to say it's a system, not a streak. What does that mean? Everybody wants predictable growth in today's time. Nobody wants surprises, and especially for startups, for small businesses, mid-sized businesses, they want to know that revenue is all there in the pipeline. Otherwise, anything can happen at any point in time, either regulatory environment, global environment, political environment. They do not have those deep pockets to survive. How should they then build up their system as a predictable system and not just a streak, if at all there was a happy time for them?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and that's one that I get quite often and talk about a lot. And there's no one answer to that question, right? It really depends upon what kind of business we are trying to grow. Every system is going to be a little bit different based on the business, the target consumer, competition, right? There are a lot of variables that go into it. But what we basically mean by a system is intentionality. Start with strategy. Be intentional about who you're trying to reach and how you're going to try to reach them. Think it through. Don't just go out into the market and start trying things, which is not to say that you shouldn't pilot, you shouldn't test. You absolutely should. But you need to really think through intentionally, what is the market that I'm serving? Don't be solution focused, right? I think a lot of people go into it thinking about their solution and pouring everything into their solution. You really want to be problem focused. So what is the problem that I'm solving? And how do I go about best solving that problem? The solution comes from that, right? So building a revenue system starts with figuring out, what is the problem that I'm solving for my target customers? Where am I going to find them in the most efficient way? In other words, what channels, what trade shows, what websites do they go to, what articles do they read, what podcasts do they listen to? Where am I going to best find that buyer that's got intent, that's close to the buying event? And then you construct your tactics around reaching those target customers in that place. Another example of how revenue really is a system is when you think about the relationship between marketing and sales. So in many organizations, they look at marketing as communications, websites, generating sales materials, flyers, and sometimes even marketing is responsible for what people call MQLs, or marketing qualified leads. Sales, on the other hand, is typically responsible for going out and finding prospects, hunting, and then also closing. So again, in many organizations, they charge their sales team with actual prospecting, not with just selling. And what that leads to is this rock star salesperson mentality, right? And we've all been in organizations that had them, and they're great. The problem is rock star salespeople kind of use their own system. They don't use the company's system. They do their own thing, and they're able to do it and get away with it in spite of not having a system. So building up predictable growth depends upon defining roles and processes throughout your entire funnel, from marketing to sales to customer success and beyond.
Right, right, Rich. You also talk about customers, understanding the customers' behavioral signs of buying. So which comes first? Is it your predictable system, or is it that customer you have to know the customers and then build up something around that?
Yeah, well, another great question, and really glad you asked it. So, very important to understand your customer first. I hope everybody hears me clearly on that. It all starts with your customer and what problem it is that you're solving for them. What pain or fear are you taking away? You have to answer that question first before you can build a system, because I don't know what system, you don't know what system to build. What problem are you solving? And the system comes from answering that question first.
Right, right. So who understands the customer best? Is it the one who is creating the system? Is it the marketing team? Or is it the sales team? Who should understand the customer best?
Yeah, so again, another good question, and the short answer is everybody needs to be, everyone needs to have an understanding of the customer, and I strongly encourage executives and leaders, no matter what your role is, and always have in every organization I've been a part of, I strongly suggest that they listen in on sales calls, or they attend a sales meeting, or they listen in on customer success calls, because you really have to hear it from the customer and feel what they're, to feel what they're feeling. So rounding back to your question, with being a little bit more precise, I think it's both marketing and sales's role to really understand the customer well. Marketing typically is charged with going out and getting market level data, even running market level research. Right? Sales, on the other hand, is in the midst of speaking to individual prospects and getting direct feedback. Those are very different kinds of research. Both are extremely valuable. And one of the mistakes that I see in a lot of organizations is either marketing or sales or somebody else will come up with the system or the strategy, and they do it in isolation without involving the rest of the organization or key stakeholders in the process. So that's one of the classic reasons why marketing and sales end up not getting along. Because if marketing creates this strategy and new campaign and what they're going to do to drive demand generation this quarter, and they don't involve sales in that process, sales is not going to be bought into what marketing is doing. And you're creating, you're creating this opportunity for a lot of tension within your team and a lack of cohesion. And the fact is, because each of those groups has slightly different information, and both of those pools of information are very, very valuable, the plan would be a lot stronger if they brought that together.
Right, right. So now AI has come in, and now marketing as well as the sales, they both have AI to discuss what they can refine, what is the problem, what direction they can take in terms of advertising, in terms of talking about whatever product they have got. And even sales will have a better understanding of a customer in whatever way it is possible. Do you think this is creating more help for these two departments, or is it actually signaling that they won't be needed in as much importance as it was in earlier times, because there is already so much of gap between them, and then we'll also come to the gap between the marketers as well as the CEOs themselves. So, and they are the ones who are going to decide about everything. How do you see this dynamic right now? How do you see that is panning out in the times to come?
Yeah, I think the dynamic right now is everybody's scrambling to answer some of those questions that you asked. And no one that I've seen really has it completely figured out yet. I think that, so AI is changing a lot of things. The question you asked was specifically around marketing roles and sales roles and how AI is going to change those roles. And there's no question that it will. And it will probably mean, not that you don't need people anymore. I think the people who are going to be left behind are the people who have not learned how to use AI. And if you learn how to use the tools, they tend to make you much more effective and efficient. I still think that there is a need for the human level creativity and direction that is hard for AI tools to replicate, because in essence, they're always looking in the rearview mirror. They're using and they're very large language models, like huge models of things that have happened in the past to predict the future. And so that can be helpful and give you some ideas, but at the end of the day, I think it takes it takes human creativity to be the spark that drives what AI may be able to do for you. And one other, just while we're on the subject, thing that I think is really important for your audience to think about is, when I get asked that question, most of the time people are asking about, well, what should we do internally with our internal systems and processes and staff and skill sets? How do we incorporate those tools into what we do to make us more efficient, more effective, reduce our operating costs, et cetera? What they're not thinking about enough is, how is AI changing the behavior of our buyers? Because we're all consumers, right? And we're all using these tools as well. And the advent of AI search engines, people call them different things, generative engines, answer engines, whatever you call them, these AI search platforms are dramatically changing how people shop and buy for various products and services. And that's happening both in B2B or B2C, which is kind of obvious, you'd expect it, but it's also happening in the B2B world to a extreme degree. So you really have to think about, well, how is our buyer experience different? And how is AI changing that buyer experience? And how do we adapt to that so that we can best take advantage of it and leverage it and hopefully outrun our competition?
Right, right, Rich. Now, sales and marketing, their differences, their understanding or not understanding about each other's roles can be still understood. But why this whole gap between, the CEO as well as, with the marketing people? Why is it like that? And
Yeah,
how is it impacting the sales team and the revenues of the organization?
yeah, great question. And I think one of the main sources of the disconnect between CEOs and particularly their marketing team, and sometimes also their sales team, is marketing team tends to speak in use marketing terms when they're presenting plans or results or projects. For example, they'll talk about, well, this particular campaign drove a certain number of page views. It drove a certain number of likes or an engagement level, or here's how our brand awareness has increased in the marketplace. And when a CEO hears things like that, so they don't think in those terms. They think in more of the first order business terms, business outcomes, right? Cost of acquisition, ARR, NRR, right? Churn rate, their profit margin, right? They're thinking in those terms, not in the page views, web traffic, right? Email open rate, click-throughs. So when you use terms like that with them, they're sitting there asking themselves, well, okay, that's great, but I don't know if I'm making any money. So I think for marketers to be more effective with their CEOs and their entire, executive team, leadership team, board of directors, investors, whatever you have, it's really important to translate your marketing results into and connect them to business outcomes. So, for example, web traffic, traffic to your website. What is that really, right? One way to define that would be, well, that's potential demand, right? Great. So instead of talking about, hey, we created this much traffic to your website, instead go into your CEO and say, hey, this campaign created this much potential demand. Okay, now that's a term that's going to get their attention. It's, oh, there's potential demand. Great. What are we doing about that? Right? You see how you get to the next question, right? Because you're connecting it to a business outcome that the CEO cares about.
Absolutely, absolutely. That brings me to your revenue science framework. Tell us a bit about that so that it can help. Also, one more thing is that the problems that we discussed, are they specific to some sectors, only for products, also for services, or not for services? Just to understand where these dynamics, impact maximum.
Yeah, no, I think it applies regardless of whether you're B2B, B2C, services, product, hospitality. These are really universal principles. I think that can be applied to really any business. The revenue science methodology starts with a good understanding of behavioral science. It's really applying behavioral science to typical marketing and sales strategies and tactics. And what behavioral science is basically the study of how people make decisions. Founded in the field of behavioral economics that is really, less than 20 years old. It's relatively new. But the basic premise of it is flipping classical economics on its head. Anybody that studied classical economics was probably taught the rational actor theory. And everything in classical economics assumes that people are rational and make rational decisions. Well, the reality is we as human beings we are not rational beings. We are emotional beings that think occasionally. And so understanding that it's really emotions and that part of your brain that makes decisions and drives what you do, and you tend to decide you like something for whatever reason, and then you rationalize it later. And you tell yourself it's because it's a great price, or because I'm saving a lot of money, or because I really like the color, or you tend to use the features to justify the feeling that you already had. So in building revenue systems, it's really important to think about, well, how are we being cognizant of how our buyers really think and how they really make decisions and what really drives them to act, as opposed to, what most people do is they lead with, all the things that they think are great about their product. And that's not really resonating with their target audience, right? Their audience wants to know, how are you solving my problem? And how are you the best to solve my problem, right? And that could be anything from, okay, I'm a restaurant and I'm solving the problem of people are hungry for lunch and they want to eat quickly and they want to know that they're going to be able to get back to their office in time. Okay, I'm not serving lunch, I'm solving that problem for people. You see the difference? And that's really, I think, the root of revenue science methodology, is getting that right first, and then building systems and processes around that lead to predictable growth.
Absolutely, Rich. Absolutely. There is so much to learn about all this from you. And I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of companies would want to connect with you from all across the world. What's the best way for them to do so?
Well, thank you very much. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is through my website. It's richmsmith.com. I also host a podcast myself called Revenue Science, which you can find really anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here.